Pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you and close all other tabs in your browser, because your financial future depends on the next few minutes. What you are about to hear is not sensationalist speculation. It's not an internet conspiracy theory, and it's definitely not another clickbait designed to scare amateur investors. We are dealing with absolute mathematics and documented facts that the global financial mainstream has actively chosen to ignore to protect the interests of a desperate institutional elite. There is a silent systemic collapse happening this very second beneath your feet, a structural implosion that has already begun to erode the foundations of the American and global economy. The daily smokescreen over stock market fluctuations serves only to distract you from the real catastrophe that is already underway. The trigger for this systemic trap is not a prediction for the next decade, but a lethal drain already recorded in the closed reports for the 2024 to 2025 period. The Equitable Institute and the Reason Foundation have mapped a trillion-dollar hole, completely invisible to the average public, an absolutely colossal uncovered liability ranging between $1.27 trillion and $1.48 trillion in state and local public pension funds in the United States alone. This staggering number represents the exact and mathematically unsolvable abyss between the benefits promised to more than 40 million citizens and the real money that, in the harsh truth, no longer exists in the coffers. It is a true accounting death spiral, a brutal and destructive force swallowing all the liquidity that once sustained blind trust in the illusory integrity of the government. While the smiling anchors of mainstream newspapers celebrate temporary and artificially inflated stock index gains, they cowardly refuse to report on the evaporation of liquidity that threatens to obliterate institutional assets. The visceral reality is that the greatest pillars of security in the Western financial system have rapidly transformed into the largest and most reckless hidden hedge funds in all of human history. What they are hiding from you with this false narrative of economic recovery is the countdown to an unprecedented reality check, where real money bleeds daily without any prudential control. You are at an irrevocable historical crossroads, and if you continue to trust the empty promises of the traditional fiat system, you will inevitably be dragged along with them to the bottom of this irreversible and devastating financial abyss. Prepare to see the unspeakable. To understand the true mechanics of this impending collapse, you first need to swallow the red pill and abandon the comforting illusion that pension funds are merely safe government vaults. The average public, hypnotized by the media, naively believes that a pension crisis simply means the government has run out of money. This is categorically false. The real crisis, already bleeding behind the scenes, is a violent insolvency through deep leverage in utterly illiquid assets. To cover a historic hole caused by aging populations and suicidal low-interest rate policies, institutional managers abandoned the monotonous safety of U.S. Treasury bonds. They transformed the future of 40 million citizens into the largest and most reckless global casino. The security you perceive today is a monumental farce, a dam with deep structural cracks about to give way under the pressure of relentless and destructive mathematics. The systemic mechanism, already irreparably broken, operates under two colliding and deadly forces: the presumed rate of return versus the brutal liquidity trap. Approximately 60% of all current revenue from these public funds depends strictly on the perfect and uninterrupted performance of the financial market. To avoid immediate insolvency, these funds need, as if by institutional magic, to achieve presumed and unrealistic annual rates of return between 6.8% and 8%. Imagine a seizing engine, eternally operating at the red line of its rev range just to prevent the vehicle from plummeting downhill. With violently volatile markets and recent systemic shocks, such as the vertiginous fall of April 2025, these profitability targets have become pure statistical fiction, an accounting lie totally disconnected from the real economy and the laws of financial physics. Desperate for this impossible profitability, managers injected trillions of dollars into the darkest and most stagnant corners of the market, private equity funds, and, primarily, commercial real estate, the dreaded CRE sector. We're talking about gigantic empty office towers in urban centers like Chicago or San Francisco, ghostly properties that absolutely nobody wants to rent or buy. This is the plumbing clogging in real time. When a high-pressure pipe is filled with concrete instead of flowing water, structural failure is simply a matter of basic physics. The funds simply don't have liquid dollars in cash. They hold toxic, frozen assets. Their balance sheets, which the media defends as solid, are now an elaborate work of fiction specifically designed to keep the herd docile while smart money evaporates through institutional emergency exits. The fatal flaw in this cursed machine explodes precisely at the moment of financial execution. When thousands of retirees demand their monthly checks to survive, the fund needs hard cash, not illusory slices of a decaying commercial building in the center of a metropolis. The system demands liquid financial blood, but its arteries are clogged with worthless bricks and privately held companies that aren't worth half their claimed value. It's the classic, terrifying dynamic of falling dominoes, a chain reaction impossible to pause. Money is physically locked in a paralyzed dimension of the economy. The second the outflow of capital surpasses the imaginary inflow, the engine completely collapses, grinding the gears of trust and leaving millions of ordinary citizens utterly defenseless against inevitable chaos. If these funds try to sell this mountain of commercial junk to generate liquidity and pay retirees, they will instantly trigger an unstoppable death spiral. Selling these buildings today means revaluing them at market price, the dreaded mark-to-market. The instant they do so, they will be forced to publicly acknowledge massive losses, which will technically bankrupt the fund the following morning. Instead of accepting reality, the system has adopted the cowardly practice of extend and pretend. They roll over the debt indefinitely and pretend the rotten asset is still worth its original astronomical face value. It's the institutional equivalent of putting grotesque makeup on a financial corpse and trying to convince the public it's still breathing. A structural trap so deep that the slightest shock of reality has the power to pulverize the entire system. The Financial Stability Board, the FSB, has already published stark and terrifying reports in 2024 and 2025, warning of the lethal vulnerability of these non-bank investors. The mathematical impossibility of fixing it is not a debate, it is a cold, calculating fact. The defense mechanism has been deactivated, liquidity has silently evaporated, and the exit doors for the general public are already being discreetly welded shut from the inside by regulators. We are witnessing the slow-motion implosion of the largest financial safety net ever designed. The public remains asleep, trusting in a state security that has already died in the closed balance sheets. When the last illusion of liquidity crumbles and the final domino hits the ground, the avalanche of insolvency will sweep away the assets of those who preferred to believe in the anesthesia of television instead of facing the brutality of the numbers that are already screaming in front of us. The mainstream media, in its routine cowardice, will try to sell you the pathetic narrative that this crisis is just another unpredictable post-pandemic event, a mere accidental stumble on the path to prosperity. Don't be naive enough to believe this prefabricated lie. Cold historical data shows exactly the opposite. We are reliving the very same destructive pattern that pulverized fortunes in the past. What unfolds before our eyes today is the grim reincarnation of the infamous savings and loans crisis of the 80s and 90s, grotesquely fused with the criminal accounting manipulation of the 2008 subprime crisis. History not only repeats itself, it echoes with relentless ferocity to punish the unwary. The signs of structural implosion have always been identical. The institutional arrogance has always been the same. And those who ignored the warning in those decades lost absolutely everything overnight in the death spiral. Go back in time and observe the anatomy of the disaster. In the dark ages of savings and loans, financial institutions were already technically dead, suffocated by a brutal rise in interest rates that melted their assets. However, instead of acknowledging bankruptcy and protecting the population, state regulators approved the nefarious regulatory forbearance. In practice, they gave banks an institutional free pass to avoid updating their rotting balance sheets with the real, bloody losses. It was a silent conspiracy to hide the evaporation of liquidity from the public until the bubble burst, transferring the trillion-dollar loss directly to the taxpayers. The system always prefers to sacrifice the common citizen rather than admit its own structural bankruptcy. operating under a systemic denial that delays execution and multiplies the terrifying pain of the final catastrophe. Today, the Machiavellian script repeats itself with an accuracy that should make your stomach churn. Mammoth entities like the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, PBGC, along with irresponsible state governments, issue press releases celebrating minor improvements whenever the stock market shows an illusory sign of improvement. It's institutionalized creative accounting operating at full steam to anesthetize your perception of risk. They celebrate phantom profits in virtual spreadsheets, deliberately ignoring the fact that the toxic bomb of the commercial real estate sector and the trillion-dollar real estate debt has never been detonated. They act as if they could cure a severe internal hemorrhage by putting a bandage on the patient's skin. This vile tactic of data manipulation serves to keep you complacent within a systemic trap that is already set and about to crush your financial future without any mercy, repeating the very same disaster of 2008. This is the classic and unchanging anatomy of the financial disaster that annihilates entire generations. The cycle always follows the same ominous progression. First comes systemic governmental denial, followed by institutionalized creative accounting, and inevitably, the collapse culminates in a terrifying liquidity panic. This event has occurred before. The red warnings were flashing exactly as they are now, and those who blindly trusted the word of the bureaucrats were the ones who paid the price with the sacrifice of their lives. When the liquidity panic explodes this time, the doors of banks and funds will be locked in your face, and the illusion of security will evaporate into thin air like smoke. Understand, once and for all, that the system is not your friend. It is a parasite designed to suck your wealth the minute the pyramid of empty promises finally collapses upon itself without warning. We have reached the dark core of this impending tragedy, the precise moment when you need to abandon the childish belief that the government or the central bank will emerge as saviors at the last second. The cruel mathematical reality is that large corporations and the Federal Reserve are hopelessly trapped in a lethal systemic trap, cornered between a rock and a hard place with no viable escape route. There is no magic reset button or money printer capable of fixing a structural implosion of this magnitude without completely destroying the fabric of society. Any desperate attempt at intervention by the broken system will only serve as a relentless accelerator for the imminent collapse. The traditional financial system has exhausted all its illusionary tricks, and the toolbox of the bureaucrats in charge is utterly empty in the face of the abyss that has irreversibly and definitively opened beneath our feet. Analyze coldly the mathematical impossibility of the institutional fix that is being hidden from you daily. If the Federal Reserve decides not to intervene and shut off the capital taps, opting for a falsely responsible stance, pension funds will technically go bankrupt in a matter of months. Without the artificial injection of liquidity, the evaporation of liquidity in the commercial real estate market will become absolute, freezing withdrawals and paralyzing the cash flow of 40 million American citizens at once. It is the triggering of a mechanical death spiral, where the absence of real dollars in cash will force the liquidation of toxic assets for pennies in the secondary market. The clogged plumbing will finally burst, and the illusion of solvency will crumble before the incredulous eyes of a population that blindly trusted in the stability of a financial system that was already dead and completely rotten from within. On the other hand, if the central bank panics and chooses the path of a historic bailout, firing up the printing presses to manufacture the trillions of dollars needed for a monumental bailout, the result will be infinitely more catastrophic for your life. The rampant creation of fiat currency from absolute nothingness will trigger a wave of unchecked and uncontrollable inflation, instantly eroding the purchasing power of the very retirement they pretend to be desperately trying to protect. The retired citizen may even receive their monthly check at the end of the month, but the value of that piece of paper will not be enough to buy even the most basic medicines for their survival. The system delivers the nominal promise, but silently steals your purchasing power through the invisible tax of hyperinflation, grinding the middle class in the gears of a totally disfigured and bankrupt economy. The brutality of this systemic trap lies in the fact that any choice made by the authorities will end in the veiled confiscation of your hard-earned wealth and dignity. When inflation spirals out of control and insolvency threatens the large regional banks, which are the true guarantors of this mountain of real estate garbage, the government will be forced to implement draconian capital control measures. They will freeze bank accounts, limit international transfers, and prohibit the withdrawal of physical assets, locking you inside a ship that is rapidly sinking in murky waters. It is the classic and desperate response of a cornered state that prefers to sacrifice the individual's financial freedom rather than admit its historical structural failure. They will create scapegoats in the mainstream media, blaming irrelevant geopolitical events, only to mask the visceral truth that the implosion was meticulously orchestrated by the continued recklessness of the irresponsible corporate state. Understand once and for all that the paradigm of state protection has been reduced to ashes, and you are completely alone in the unforgiving modern financial battlefield. The government cannot and will not save you, because the government itself is the epicenter of this trillion-dollar accounting devastation that actively consumes the oxygen of the global economy. Waiting for a benevolent stimulus package or relying on paper regulatory guarantees is equivalent to voluntarily signing your own sentence of definitive and undeniable financial ruin. The machine has broken down, the pilots have abandoned the cockpit with golden parachutes, and the impact with the rocky ground of reality is no longer a mere probability, but an absolute mathematical certainty. The only rational and lifelong way out for those who see through this fog of lies is to take immediate control of their own destiny before the last doors close. We've reached the tipping point where paralyzing fear transforms into tactical power, the ultimate reward for your retention of this dossier so far. Immediate survival demands that you surgically disengage from institutional counterparty risk before public panic sets in. Your first asymmetric move, your ultimate shield, is a coordinated flight to real, unconfiscatable assets. Position yourself in physical gold with direct ownership, escaping the systemic trap of synthetic paper ETFs, and secure your Bitcoin in self-custody, shielding your wealth from an irremediably compromised fiat system. Simultaneously, allocate capital to very short-term treasury bonds, ensuring immediate liquidity while large institutional banks freeze withdrawals in the death spiral. Immediately move away from regional banks, the necrotic arteries that silently finance this trillion-dollar bubble of rotting commercial real estate. Your second move is the spear that pierces the defenses of a broken system, transforming inevitable collapse into generational profit for the intelligent individual. It's a surgical frontal assault, structuring short-selling operations or buying aggressive put options against colossal real estate investment trusts, REITs, focused on office buildings. These gigantic REITs and highly leveraged private equity firms are houses of cards about to crumble under the weight of systemic liquidity evaporation. While the mainstream media recommends blind passivity, smart money is already betting against the creative accounting that underpins the unrealistic valuations of phantom commercial buildings. You are essentially buying fire insurance on a burning building moments before the herd smells the lethal smoke. The third and most brutal asymmetrical move is the strategic accumulation of absolute firepower, the diligent building of a heavy and unshakable cash reserve. Be ruthlessly prepared for the inevitable event of forced liquidation. When pension funds begin to mathematically collapse, they will be forced to vomit high-quality real assets onto the secondary market at completely irrational prices just to try to stem the immediate implosion. It is in that exact millisecond of institutional despair that the liquid-positioned investor will attack without any mercy. You will have the historic opportunity to buy solid infrastructure and crucial land for humiliating fractions of cents on the dollar. The prepared individual will reign supreme over the smoldering rubble of the broken system, buying control of the future at the liquidation price of a deceitful past that no longer exists. What we've just dissected in this confidential dossier isn't an isolated event that ends when you close this video, but the brutal beginning of an ongoing collapse that will consume the economy over the coming months. The mainstream financial media, in its chronic cowardice, will continue to throw sand in your eyes, manipulating accounting balances and hiding the trillion-dollar hole that is already corroding the system from the inside out. That's precisely why you shouldn't just mechanically like this video and move on to the next empty entertainment video. You need to subscribe to this channel right now and activate all emergency notifications, transforming this space into your primary source of continuous, real-time intelligence. We will be your unwavering tactical radar while the rest of the world walks blindfolded toward the inevitable financial slaughterhouse. We've already crossed the point of no return in the 2025 and 2026 reports, and the evaporation of liquidity is already dictating the rules of the game behind the scenes of power. By subscribing, you join a shielded minority of intelligent individuals who refuse to be the sacrificial victims of a broken and fraudulent system. Each new update we bring here will focus on debunking the government narrative and providing the exact coordinates of where smart money is hiding. The institutional death spiral doesn't warn before locking the bank's doors, and your only chance of survival is to have access to unfiltered data and counterflow strategies before widespread panic takes over the streets. This channel is your sentinel against ruin. Now, I demand that you conduct a brutal audit of your own financial life and head down to the comments section to answer an absolutely vital and urgent question. What is the exact level of your current exposure to this systemic trap we've just exposed? How much of your life's hard work and family wealth is currently trapped in traditional retirement funds, institutional products from regional banks, or the false security of diversified ETFs that secretly carry this toxic commercial real estate debt? I need you to write in the comments where your financial Achilles heel is today, because it is from your answers that we will shape the next surgical defense strategies of this channel. Your personal account is the field data we need to combat misinformation. This interaction in the comments isn't mere digital engagement. It's the visceral construction of a community war room where alert individuals exchange tactical intelligence while the world outside burns in ignorance. When the mathematical implosion of pension funds is finally admitted on national television by the same bureaucrats who caused the disaster, it will be too late to try to protect your capital from forced liquidation. By publicly debating our weaknesses and our corporate protection tactics, we strengthen our collective wall against the rapidly approaching state confiscation. Read what other sentinels are reporting in the comments below, observe the patterns of capital withdrawal that have already begun silently, and use this decentralized intelligence to shield your family from the financial devastation that will mercilessly sweep through the global middle class. The clock is ticking against you, and the unforgiving mathematics of the $1.5 trillion uncovered liability doesn't forgive hesitation or complacent denial. You now possess the cutting clarity that separates the victims of the collapse from those who will build generational fortunes on the ruins of a paper economy and empty promises. Execute your asymmetrical moves with the coldness of a military surgeon, amass your firepower in liquid cash, and prepare for the greatest wealth transfer event in modern human history. The system has failed miserably to protect you, and the responsibility of forging your own leaden shield has fallen entirely on your lonely shoulders. Sign up, comment on your real exposure, and keep your eyes open. The liquidity storm has only just begun, and we will be watching everything.